Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, I know I'm a little late to the party. The movie's been out for a month, but we just didn't get around to seeing it until this weekend. So I'm a little bit behind the cycle. At some point in the future, I'll get to see Spider-Man as well, which I know is what everyone's talking about right now. But I wanted to give my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, just to let you know there are going to be spoilers involved here. I saw the movie yesterday, decided to wait a day to let the thoughts percolate. When I record these reactions too soon, I tend to give too positive a review of things, because I do really enjoy watching these movies for the most part. Not Batman. Not the Batman, I didn't like that. But for the most part, I enjoy watching these, so I do sometimes have this sort of rush from the spectacle and just the fun of it. And then once that wears off, then I can really focus on the stuff I didn't like. So my reviews always settled down a little bit. So there's a couple videos that I've made that I reviewed things a little too soon. So my reviews for Wonder Woman 84 and Thor Love and Thunder were definitely too positive. For the most part, I stick with what I said on those, but I definitely rated them too high. The problems with those were bigger problems. So the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, decided to wait a little bit, and now the wait is over, and I'm going to share these thoughts with you. General impressions were that I liked it, and I thought it was pretty good, which of course are not necessarily the same thing. I liked it better than Guardians number 2, which I thought was really try hard in terms of the humor. The Guardians Volume 3, it was a little more serious. There was a little less humor. Some of the humor was more organic. There were definitely parts that were still a little try hard, but I didn't think it was too bad in terms of that. And the other issue I had with Volume 2 was that it felt like they were just telling you the story. The characters were literally just saying the subtext. There was no subtext. It was all just and it felt very unnatural. There's some of that going on here, but I thought they did a better job with things. Things I liked about it, we see some of the continuing sort of trickle down psychological effects from the snap, particularly with the return of Gamora, and how that's affected Quill. So I like that. I like that at the end they don't get back together again, because she is a different person than different experiences than the Gamora that he knew. So I like that. I liked that they did a really good job of sort of giving all of the characters their character arc. For if you watch the 3 movies, everyone sort of gets things tied off in a good way, and you can see the arc from the beginning of the first one to the end of the third one for all of them. So I really like that, and I thought it was like a good way. All of the character arcs I liked. I liked Nebula's arc quite a lot, and Rocket's arc. This movie is really about Rocket mostly. When I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I liked that. I like they gave Mantis a little more depth. She's been played for laughs with teaming with Drax, and they do address that in here, which I really appreciated, because I really didn't like the Christmas special, because it was basically just 2 idiots destroying everything because they're morons, and I just didn't find it funny. There was the heart was missing for me. But here we get the heart back. We get the grounded character stuff. One thing they do that Thor Love and Thunder lost sight of was they don't sacrifice the emotional parts to get a laugh, which I appreciate, because it's a tricky balance, and James Gunn does sometimes go too far for the laughs and undercuts the serious stuff. But with this one, the serious stuff was serious, and So I mean, overall, I was really satisfied with all of that stuff. Now about the Rocket stuff, I mean, one flaw that I thought the movie had was it was about Rocket, but he was basically knocked out for the first like hour and 40 minutes of the movie. So even though we see him in flashbacks that he's having while he's in a coma, we get his backstory. He was weirdly disconnected from the story, and once he was back reconnected and it sort of tied in his backstory with the current story, that's where we really got the heart of the movie. So it was unfortunate that they weren't able to sort of thread that a little bit better because um, considering the movie's about Rocket, he spends most of it just in a coma, basically. So that was a flaw. I really appreciated the Rocket stuff though because I really like Rocket, but also like one of the very first comics that I bought in the first sort of year of comics, when got into comics, was the Rocket Raccoon miniseries in 1985. With I think Bill Mantlo was the writer, Mike Mignola the artist, and that was one of the very first comics that I read. And a lot of the stuff with Rocket in this movie is from that miniseries. Now I haven't reread that since I got it almost 40 years ago, but I remember like some of the characters and stuff, and so it was clearly like inspired by that, and I really appreciated that on a personal level. Um, they did a good job with sort of paying off some of the teases from the second movie, specifically. I mean the classic Guardians, which are introduced. They have a role in the second movie, but it's not very big, and we get this sort of post credits like tease, like we're going to see more of them. Well, we do see a little bit more of them, but it's not a lot. So like Starhawk and um, Charlie 27 and Martin X and whatever, they're there, but we don't really see much of them. But I appreciated that they brought that back. Um, there was even little touches with some of the supporting characters. Like there's a brief scene where Kraglin and Cosmo are playing poker, and one of the people playing poker with them is the shop owner at the beginning of the first movie that they try and sell the Infinity Stone to. So like they bring back a lot of little Easter eggs and tie everything together. So that's all great. Things I didn't like about the movie was it was way too long. It was, including the credits, it was almost 2.5 hours. And that's just like, it was just too long, and it was unnecessarily too long. Yes, they were trying to get a lot of character beats. Like every character had an arc, not just for the three movies, but for this movie. And so there's little beats they're trying to get in with everybody. But we didn't need. Some of them were like, there were payoff scenes where we have a whole sequence to pay something off, and then later on we get another sequence of those characters where we could have just taken the dialogue that paid off the original. Like there was a whole thing, a subplot, with Kraglin and Cosmo, uh, where he had called her a bad dog, and it was a recurring thing. Well, they have this whole fight sequence to show, that have him take it back and say, no, she's a good dog. Like there's a payoff there. But then we get a whole nother sequence like 10 minutes later where Cosmo once again saves everybody. And that was where like you could have just cut out the whole fight sequence that didn't really serve any purpose other than to provide that, and just had it pay off when Cosmo saves everybody 10 minutes later. There was a really cool like fight scene, a choreographed like action sequence where the Guardians, including Nebula, are finally like all reunited, and Rocket's back, and like so it's everybody together finally. And they go in this hallway, and there's like this extended like continuous shot rotating all through this hallway scene, and you can tell that they spent a great deal of time. They wanted this to be like the coolest action scene in the movie, and it was cool, but it also didn't do anything. Like there's so many long fight scenes at the end of the movie that you could have had a cool choreographed sequence like that to show everyone, but also involved with the plot that they were doing, because when they get out of that hallway, Then they have another fight, like with more people to progress the plot. There's a lot of things like that where they were just unnecessary sequences. One of the running jokes in the movie is that everyone's obsessed with looking cool. They're like, did that look cool? And that felt like something James Gunn was doing with the movie, where he kept trying to come up with cool sequences, and rather than like tweak the existing sequence to make it cool, he just plug in this cool thing, and so it just ended up being bloated and long. Like, there's a whole part of the movie that takes place on Counter Earth. So they introduced the idea of Counter Earth. High Evolutionary is the bad guy. They introduced the idea of Counter Earth, which kind of makes sense because Warlock's in the movie. More on that in a minute. And then, like, a bunch of, like, dumb hijinks happen on Counter Earth, and then High Evolutionary blows Counter Earth up. And then they continue the fight off in space. And so it was just like, why did we even have Counter Earth? Why did we need any of that sequence? Did we need anything that happened on Counter Earth? Like, I think there's a way to cut out like 20 minutes of the movie there, without doing it, like just introducing this whole setting just so you can have a few goofy jokes and then blow the planet up. Like, it just felt weird, and unnecessary. So I didn't like that. And then of course there's Adam Warlock. Now, he's absolutely nothing like the character in the comic, and in a way that I think fans of Adam Warlock will find highly irritating, because he's basically a moronic teenager or 20-something. Like, they have one throwaway line where High Evolutionary makes a comment about what an idiot Warlock is, and the High Sovereign Aisha is basically says like, well, you got him out of the cocoon before he was ready. So that was a throwaway line to explain why he's a doofus instead of Adam Warlock, because he wasn't finished cocooning. And there's a little bit of that in the comics. Like, when he first is born as him, he doesn't like know anything that's happening, and we get that here. We get this incredibly powerful character that has no moral compass, and he just doesn't know. He just doesn't know right from wrong. He doesn't know anything from anything, and the people steering him are, tools. And so he ends up being a tool himself, and he gets a little redemption arc at the end, but he's nothing other than that little bit. He's like nothing like the character in the comics, and it didn't bother me that much because I'm not a huge Warlock fan, but I could see how it could really irritate people. I will say that my wife doesn't know anything about Warlock, has never read any of the Warlock comics with Warlock, and she liked the character in the movie. So that's the most important thing, I suppose. But yeah, so I mean, it wasn't perfect. It was too long. Sequences that were just there for the sake of being cool instead of moving the story forward. And that's unfortunate because there was a lot of heart and a lot of really good character stuff, but it was stretched out, and sort of cut up a little bit because it had all these other little goofy things like squeezed in. So, I mean, it wasn't perfect, but I liked it better than the second one. I thought it was good. I would give it probably a B. The way I feel right now is like a solid B. If I'm being uncharitable, I might say a B minus because it was long. So when I think about rewatching it, there's like whole giant sequences in the movie that I don't really want to see again. But there's a lot of good stuff. I mean, I think if the movie had been an hour and 45 minutes long instead of 2.5 hours long, it would have been awesome. So what are you going to do? You never get director's cuts, though, that are shorter than the original version. So I don't think we're going to get that. But overall, it was a good ending. They ended it with Rocket being the leader of a new group of Guardians of the Galaxy, Quill going back to Earth to finally sort of reconnect with his grandfather, who we did see in the second one as just a cameo for a few minutes. But Quill has gone to sort of reconnect with his humanity and sort of deal with the trauma finally. That's one thing about the movie, is there's a lot of it was subtext about dealing with trauma and how the Guardians themselves are a group of characters that are all have all been severely traumatized in one way or another, and they're all damaged. That's why they find this family together. And this movie sort of ends with all of them having finally dealt with their trauma in different ways. You know, Drax becomes like a surrogate father to a bunch of people, to a bunch of children that need him, um, and Nebula is sort of the surrogate mother, where she's trying to create the environment that she never got from her father, Thanos. And you know, Rocket gets closure on stuff, everything that happens in the movie when we see the flashbacks, and so everybody sort of is ready to move on. So I think it's a great time to sort of end the franchise as we know it. There is a tease at the end saying that Star Lord will be back. It doesn't say the Guardians will be back, but it says Star Lord will be back. So I find that interesting. I expect him, now that he's back on Earth. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see him as one of the member of the Avengers when we get the Avengers team for to deal with Kang. It's just a wild guess, but they specifically said that Star-Lord will be back, and they did place him on Earth at the end. So I'm expecting to see him less of the space stuff and you know, on Earth. So we'll see how that goes. But overall, I liked it quite a bit. And you know, it's been what, like 6 years since the first one came out, and I think if you watch the three together, you could probably skip the Christmas special, but if you watch the three, I think it holds together pretty well. So let me know what you think of the movie down below, and I'll see you next time.